It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza.
Hi, Irwin. How are you doing today?
It's all good. It's all good. So let's go to Wainscott.
Yay. One of my favorite spots in the world.
All right. Full disclosure here. This is a Wainscott resident we're talking to. So yeah, she's going to have a little bit of, you may get a little Wainscott pride coming through during this conversation, but
100%.
100%. So
even though I did grow up in the village of East Hampton.
Right. Which she was a village, but she's all in with. Well,
I was an upstreeter, but
you were an upstreeter, but yes, you were an upstreeter. So are you all in with Wainscott now? Like you're all in with Wainscott. You are.
I'm all in. I'm all in since I started living here. 2000, I mean, really officially, probably around 2000, anywhere between 2002, 2005, that I really became immersed in Wainscott.
Okay. So this is a 17-year Wainscott resident we're speaking to, and Esperanza's two children cannot be mistaken for upstreeters. They are legitimate, born and bred Wainscotters.
Well, here's the deal. Here's a distinction, because I have this wonderful book called Wainscott Dumplings by Alice Osborne Hand. And it's a book that I've recommended to you in the past, and anybody that lives in Wainscott and East Hampton, or in general, anybody interested in history needs to read it. Wainscott Dumplings is about people born and bred in Wainscott. And when I say born and bred, it's sort of how we've discussed about Bonikers. You have to have been born in the house in Wainscott.
Okay. So
no Southampton hospital allowed.
I'm going to make a very educated guess that Carmen and Owen were not born in Wainscott.
No, I tried. I really did want to have those home births, but
got it. Okay. It didn't happen. There was no East Hampton Town police officer delivering your babies on the front porch like we had here last week. But okay, just wanted to get some clarification there. But
but you're right. You're right, and I'll tell you why I choose Wainscott and why I chose Wainscott. And really, I mean, we were renting when my children started going to school at the Wainscott school.
Okay.
And I told my husband then, I don't care if we have to rent for the next 10 years or whatever it is in order to get my children to be able to attend the Wainscott school, because for me, their experience was like what I felt I experienced on a much smaller scale for them, because Wainscott School is the last, one-room schoolhouse next to Sagaponack that has one as well. But just walking down Main Street, Wainscott, I had that, that open vista of Wainscott Main Street is what made me realize this is the place where I have to be, because it reminded me of my childhood.
Wow. I have to tell you, the hairs on my arm are standing up right now.
Oh, well, that's so nice, because really that's what happens to me.
I mean, oh my God. I mean, wow. I guess they weren't standing when I was going to a public school with 41 other kids in my first grade class in Queens, but that's a conversation for another day. But
that's more than is in a whole school of Wainscott. Double,
exactly.
Actually, yeah.
Oh, but talking about Wainscott, and we're going to focus more on the southern portion of Wainscott. With East Hampton and Southampton, their estate sections, their respective estate sections, we're going to call them, for the sake of this broadcast, the bookends, because you had East Hampton to the east, Southampton to the west, and those estate sections were estate sections 100 years ago. They were summer colonies, the summer cottages. But what fell in between, and I'm going to do this from west to east, Watermill, Bridgehampton, Sagaponack, Wainscott, this was farmland. This didn't look or feel anything like the estate sections in either East Hampton or Southampton. And it really was farmland. We use the term ancient history a lot on our Hamptons. It wasn't ancient history.
No,
This
in
was
my
farmland.
lifetime, again, we've talked, yeah,
Again, within our lifetimes, vistas that you saw from 27, literally virtually to the ocean.
clear to the ocean.
Clear. I mean, you have vivid memories of this, right? Being
I
on
do.
27 and whether it's Wainscott, Sagaponack, just a clear shot.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, incredible. So,
And, I just as an aside, that was, that talk about how artists come out here for the light.
yes,
Guess why there was that light? It's because of how flat this topography is, with that open expanse that, you're surrounded by water. And I think that creates this atmospheric light that we have out here, which we'll get to, I'm sure, in this conversation, is what's actually being sacrificed with all the changes with development.
correct. And again, we're not going to state, there's no need for us to state the obvious. Anyone that lives out here now, drives on 27 now, if you're driving east and turn your head to the right to look south towards the ocean, you're going to see vistas that have been obliterated, have been obstructed, view sheds. And this is a point you and I have spoken of in the past. It isn't only the housing, but the screening.
Yes.
The rows of arborvitae and that just I'm constantly amazed at. But
yeah, that have really obliterated the character of this area, which was so rural, and have divided everything up and yeah, changed changed the light. I mean, really, literally have changed the light.
It has. It's funny when you drive down heading east on 27 and you're going, you did have that. There's one large field that you see on 27, the one I'm referring to. It's I guess that was the Schwenk field, if I'm not.
It is still, yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
To give anyone a reference point, it's sort of like opposite that little Allstate Insurance house,
right? And Poxabog Golf
and Poxabog, and that for me, whenever I drive by that, it's always that's the metaphor for what used to be, because that vista, which is still a beautiful vista, especially if you drive there like at sunrise or sunset, it's lovely.
Yeah.
But it's lost a lot because that vista used to extend. Esperanza can speak to it directly.
Yes.
It extended literally. You saw the water glistening.
You did rather.
Right.
Yes.
But since we're talking really about Wainscott and that southern portion of Wainscott, it really does, especially when you're on Wainscott Main Street and those areas. Wainscott Main Street basically runs from Town Line Road, which is the road that separates the two towns, East Hampton and Southampton, and it basically ends at to the east, sort of at the Georgia Association is where it lets in. But that is really, I would throw that to you. We're going to call that the heart of the historical section, even though it's not an official, unfortunately, historical district. That is that's where all the Wainscott history is. Right.
That's the historic heart where it was originally settled by the Osbornes and the Hands and the Strongs and so forth. Yeah,
exactly. And one of my favorite things, which is sort of almost a surprise, when we did a walk with the Wainscott Heritage Project, we being the East Hampton Trails Group. Esperanza is very involved in that, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. But the first thing when you come uptown, when you come from the ocean on Town Line Road and make that right turn onto Wainscott Main Street, is you see what once was a Wainscott Post Office.
Yes, one of the last surviving Wainscott post offices. That's not the one right on 27 Montauk Highway, the official one since the, I think, early 80s, late 70s. Yeah.
Yeah, which looks like any post office anywhere. Not knocking the Wainscott Post Office. I happen to go in there a lot.
Right. No,
they're
but
very
these,
nice. But
these were in houses, right?
Right. But this was just such a special little building. And I guess I guess that was the owner of this house, the person who ever bought that house. I don't know when. Do you have any idea how long that was operating as a post office? Do you know like what year approximately it was still? Do we have a guesstimate?
That one I think was after the Osborne General Store on Hollow Road. So it was somewhere between the 50s until the 70s. So I think something like that. Yeah.
Gosh.
At one point, it even had a telephone booth. I've seen a photograph of it with a telephone booth in front. Post office. This was that was downtown Wainscott.
Right.
You had a general store, you had the post office, you had, those amenities, if you will, for people who lived in that area. And so they were places that people would gather and get the gossip and catch up with each other. And yeah,
I keep saying how hard it is to believe. And this is always the part of these conversations that really get me. It's not, here I go. I'm going to get ready because I'm going to say it again. It's not ancient history. This was the 60s, the 70s, when this area, which now is zillion-dollar real estate. We are not a real estate podcast. We're not going to spend much time, but trust me, it is expensive real estate. And yet here in this house, which this particular homeowner has preserved, keeps the plaque right on the house that this was the original Wainscott. This was going on. There was a coffee clutch at the Wainscott Post Office on Wainscott Main Street in our lifetime.
Yeah. I have this great book by Jason Epstein, who I think just died recently, actually, too. He was a publisher, and Elizabeth Barlow, who saved Central Park. Elizabeth Barlow Rogers. At the time, she was just Elizabeth Barlow. This book is from 1975. It's called East Hampton, A History and Guide. I think you're very familiar with this book. The post office, I have the map of Wainscott in front of me with Main Street delineated. And the post office that we're talking about is a little square on that map. And there it is, and that was 1975. It was still there.
Gosh.
Yeah. And the one-room schoolhouse was still a one-room schoolhouse.
Honestly, you really are doing the impossible right now and rendering me speechless. Okay, because normally I don't come up for air, but I can't help it. It's so difficult. It's so hard to believe in so many ways that in the not too distant past, this was downtown Wainscott. Yeah. Let's go to the post office. Maybe did they sell pop there? I mean, there was people getting, that's the kind of vibe it had. But it's a good lead in to continue our stroll sort of down the heart, which is Wainscott Main Street. So you mentioned the Osborne General Store. The Wainscott Heritage Project actually showed us this when we did the walk with the East Hampton Trails Preservation Society. And we saw that Osborne General Store, and one of the members, John,
owner, yes,
mentioned that as a boy going to that general store.
Oh yes, yeah. Because so the general store, which was originally a boat repair shop that Gilbert Chancey Osborne was the one that ran it, and he had a terrible accident, and then could not any longer build or repair boats. So he went into the business of a general store. And, I don't think the story is he didn't really work very hard at it in the sense of making it like nowadays, you really have to, you have to be like an influencer to have any kind of store. Right. But that was not the case. And there's some really funny stories about him. But the kids would go to that general store from from the school and go get their, like their penny candy and that
Right.
kind of thing, right?
Which is what John was he was relaying stories like that. He went on his bike,
Right.
to the general
Yeah, for
store.
sure. And that was, but I believe by the time that he was going, I think that it was at that point, maybe I'm wrong, that it was then Chancey's daughter and her husband who were running the general store at the time. Because if we're talking about 60s, I think that was when Chancey had died and she had taken it over. And kept it going, which is such a wonderful thing. It was even a gas station at one point, that was
it's yeah.
And everybody congregated there. I mean, it's not, it was like the people from the association would get,
Right.
you'd get your mail there in the early years before
Right.
it was the post office that we were talking about closer to town line. Chancey was the postmaster. And so
Wow.
this was, it was the hub. It was the hub.
It was small town life.
Exactly.
Is what it was.
And again, miraculously, as the post office that we were referring to, that was the little house that you found so charming. The general store is still in the hands of, it's in the grandson of Chancey Osborne.
Wow.
So he and his wife restored the general store building.
Right.
And the house that stands behind it, and they really, they've kept the spirit of Wainscott alive by doing that.
And it really has, and that's always what I've loved about Wainscott. It despite, and we're not going to lie, there have been development pressures there, like there've been development pressures everywhere, but there's still. It still has retained that rural character. When we stood in front of that old general store and looked at the vistas to the right and to the left, and yes, if you looked in the distance, we all saw the row of 20-foot arborvitae. Well, we can't avoid that, but the vistas, there were some very well preserved vistas there, and it still had that rural kind of vibe, as long as you didn't try to look too far.
Yes, it's true.
Because then, unfortunately, you do lose a little bit. And then continuing on from here, as you touched on, the one-room schoolhouse, which still exists.
Right. Yeah.
Your son goes to the one-room schoolhouse.
My son is. Yeah. Well, there's the original, well, not the original, the fourth schoolhouse, which was the one-room schoolhouse that's closer to the corner of Main Street and Hollow Road. And then in the early 2000s, they actually succumbed. A lot of people didn't want this, but they built a whole new schoolhouse right next to the existing one,
right,
which is larger and is really still a one-room schoolhouse, but it's just much bigger, partitioned in the middle for grades K through 3. And it's next to the cemetery, which, so again, this is like the hub of Wainscott, the center.
And in terms of the farms, now again, this was a lot of farmland. We currently in Wainscott, there are still 2 farms in operation, but Babinski is still in operation.
Yes.
And is there a Dankowski farm as well?
Yes, just north of the schoolhouse.
Okay.
Along Hollow Road.
And those are both, now Babinski was, I believe, the land was preserved. It was Peconic Land Trust, something, or an easement of some kind.
Yeah. No, there's aspects of both properties that have had development rights purchased and easements and ways to protect the land. Yes.
But it is ancestors, if you will, of those families that are still farming this land today.
Well, yeah, the Dankowskis are the Dankowskis. Babinski, actually, they're descendants of Osborne.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are still going on here, and you still see those farms in operation. And there was also, I think, with Babinski, if I'm not mistaken, there was also some private partnership involved as well. I think some of the residents there also were part and parcel of making this happen.
Yeah. Any of that preservation was totally public-private between community preservation funds, Peconic Land Trust, and the community.
Private money.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I mean, it's walking, bike riding down those streets and still seeing those in existence, there's some faith being restored over
It does
there.
a heart good. It really does. Yeah.
Now, there's also there was well, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to phrase this more as a question. I was always under the impression there was a I don't know how large it was, but there was an African American enclave within Wainscott as well. I remember there was a Walker family here. I remember when I first moved here in '89. I think Roger Walker was the town justice at the time, and that particular family, and I guess the extended members were predominantly around Sayers Path in that neighborhood. Am I correct in
Yes, and yeah, there are maps indicating that there was property already owned. I think it was Jim Walker, who was the first Walker to be in Wainscott. I believe he was brought here to work on the hopping farm.
Okay.
I think.
Okay, so and I guess the Walkers that stayed there, and I think there are still some there. I guess all extended from Jim Walker, as he was the first African American in Wainscott. If I'm reading
that we know of in more recent history. I mean, I would wonder about anything prior to that, as we've had this revealed to us by the Plain Sight Project that David Rattray and Don Marie Barnes have been leading, the cause of revealing the early settlers who had slaves. And so, I would make the assumption that there would have been some evidence of that in Wainscott as well. So, but in the 19th century, Jim Walker was, and his wife were the ones. Yeah. The only ones.
We're going to close on that note with a little teaser. I like to tease. I have that reputation. But I do want to talk to you about something that's very important to you, which is the Wainscott Heritage Project. And we're talking about African American history. We're going to get deeper into this in the next episode of Our Hamptons, but just to give you an intro into the Wainscott Heritage Project, from what you told me, started with the Little House.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to tell everybody. I'm going to have Esperanza give you a couple of sentences about the Little House, and we're going to then start from there in the next episode. But we'll lead it into it now.
Okay. All right. Well, the Little House, as it's known, was a small 200 square foot structure that was on the Strong Farm, which was on Hollow Road. And that was going to be demolished last year, and we managed to save it. And thus was the genesis of Wainscott Heritage Project. What was notable about this little structure was that it was known to have been tenant housing, as they called it, for farm workers. And those farm workers that we know of were African American people who came here from Virginia primarily, lived in Wainscott, Sagaponack, ended up staying, many of them, but some were migrants. So that's kind of the history, but we keep finding a little more here and there about it. So I can't wait to talk to you about it.
I'm very excited to continue that conversation, because it's a story that's fascinating, as is the work of this particular organization, they're working so hard to keep Wainscott history alive and to bring it out there. So we're going to let Our Hamptons be that vehicle on the next episode, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So Esperanza, thanks for today. This was terrific.
Yeah, I could go, I could go on and on about Wainscott, so I can't wait for the next one. We are. I like to consider myself an honorary Wainscott resident. I don't know what gives me that right, but I'm going to go with it anyway, because we are going to get back into Wainscott on the next episode of Our Hamptons. Next time, same channel. Okay, Esperanza, Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.